Hi, and welcome. My name is Joyce Sweether of MajesticTerror.com. And today I am here with Adam Hommey, and we are talking about more reach, clients, and referrals through podcasting. Adam Hommey is a speaker, author, trainer, and consultant with nearly 20 years experience helping business creators like you win at the game of business and marketing so you can thrive from your intersection of your brilliance and your passion while making a difference for your community, market, and audience. Adam is the author of Groundhog Day is an Event, Not a Business Strategy, and a contributing author to Journeys to Success, the Millennial Edition, both international Amazon bestsellers. He has spoken on stages around the country for many years and is a sought-after expert on podcasting for entrepreneurs. As the creator of the Reach System, Adam helps you exponentially reach more profitable customers. Adam, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Well, Princess Alessandra and I are very happy to be here. I know some of our listeners like when Alessandra stops by, so here she is. I'm trying to get her to not step on the keyboard. So I'm going to put her down. She'll probably jump right back up again, but eventually she'll calm down. As long as I don't know how many of our viewers have cats today, but Alessandra has this gift, if you want to call it that. She can find a way to find the one key to step on that'll mess everything up. The other night, I was streaming something from Amazon Prime onto my television using a Chromecast. She managed to step on a key that somehow shut down the browser I was streaming Amazon through, disable my Chromecast app on my laptop, remotely disable it off the television, and cause the television to go out of HDMI mode.
That's crazy.
I don't know how to do that, but she figured it out.
So let's talk about podcasting. So how long have you been podcasting, Adam?
Well, I've been involved in podcasting for over 10 years here. And part of what we're doing here is I'm discovering that since I've acquired my new collection of fedora hats, I have to get used to wearing my headphones slightly differently. But we'll get the adjustments there just in time. Anyway, I originally got on the path about 10 years ago when I spoke at a series of events, and my offer at all of the events was for people to attend a 4-week workshop that I was doing through webinars, where I taught them how to install, configure, theme, and manage WordPress sites themselves. Not because I was trying to create a bunch of do-it-yourselfers. The actual mission is to give them the power that if they had some inspiration at 3 o'clock in the morning and wanted to put something up so they could test something in the morning, they could do it without having to wait for their assistant. And when they hired web developers, when they hired virtual assistants, when they hired digital marketing agencies, they had enough knowledge of how it actually worked to be able to ask the questions to determine if the person they were thinking about hiring also knew. So that was the gist of it. And now I need a model. So I had the Business Creators Institute, and I decided to create something called the Business Creators Radio Show. So that we put up a website for a Business Creators Radio Show. All right, got the model up, and then I let it go for 9 months. And it's like, wait, I have this podcast I want to get started. So I thought at the time, and this again shows how much I've discovered and how much things have changed since then, how many new things have come into market. Back in 2013, I thought the differentiator between whether or not you had a podcast was whether or not it showed up on what everybody at the time called iTunes, which is now properly called Apple Podcasts. So I submitted my RSS link, and I was told in the reply, this will take up to 30 days. Got confirmation that it was approved, and I was now on iTunes 24 hours later. Nice. I had no episodes, no interview scheduled, no plan. And here I was being thrust into competing into the new and noteworthy, or whatever they call it. So what did I do? I went to my archive of recent teleseminars, picked 3 that I really liked, put them up as podcast episodes, and announced the brand new Business Creators Radio Show is about to hit the airwaves. Tune in, subscribe to us, and enjoy the journey we're going to take you through as we help you discover your intersection of your brilliance and your passion. In the meantime, check out some of our greatest hits. That's how we dealt with that. So one of the learnings was, and this is what we do in the podcast Reach System, There are programs out there that'll help. They'll say, we'll launch your podcast in 2 days. Get your podcast done in a weekend. Get your podcast up in an hour. Essentially, they set you up for failure. I mean, yeah, I can go to Anchor or Podbean or something right now, set up an account, record a 5-minute audio file using Camtasia or whatever, edit it, post it, say, hey, looky, I have a podcast. Yeah, but do I have something that's going to be my key networking, client attraction, celebrity expert branding tool? That's a different story. And I know so many folks, unfortunately, who have taken these, get your podcast launched in 2 days, get your podcast done in a weekend. Now, I understand that some of these things are valuable because they can get you to take massive action. And in most of those cases, there's usually a back end that they're getting hooked on, which is usually some sort of editing and post-production service, which is fine. I'm not going to condemn it or anything at all. I'm just going to say that what makes podcast reach so valuable, and this is where I'm going to finish my story, is that it takes our many years of learning how to monetize a podcast. Now, I don't mean going out getting clicks for a quarter. I mean making real money with it and using it as a way to get clients on your calendar, get bookings, get yourself on other podcasts, get yourself on stages, fill your mastermind, put butts in seats at your event. These are just some of the things I've seen people do. Oh, and all those folks you need to reconnect with? Well, you can awkwardly say, hey, Joyce, it's been a long time. What's up with you? Or you can say, hey, Joyce, long time no see. Guess what? We're starting a new podcast. Want on? The latter has, in my experience, over a 90% yes rate, which is what we're looking for. So where podcast reach comes from, and I know you're going to ask me some questions about that, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability, is, whoa, Alessandra went for my webcam. One thing about podcasting is it's meta. It doesn't have to be perfect. So when I see people obsessing over editing and getting everything exactly right, and oh, my lighting was a little bit off. There's a little bit of glare in my glasses. I think I have to record the whole thing over again. Will my guests be pissed off if I ask them to record it again? Remember to ask me about the pre-editing process and the Clint Eastwood director style somewhere in what you're planning to do with me, and I'll cover all that. But anyway, we found the answer to all that, and it's called podcast reach. In 2019, we worked with Dan Janelle, who's known to many as the founder of PR Leads and Guaranteed Press Releases. He wrote one of the very first books about making money on the internet, as he likes to say, back when he and Al Gore were the only two people online. And he also wrote the groundbreaking book on how to use voice recognition software to write manuscripts. So somebody who's been around a long time. He created the podcast that's now called Write Your Book in a Flash as a complement to his Write Your Book in a Flash brand. He has a book around that. He has recorded courses. He has masterminds. He has book editing, book coaching, developmental editing, and ghostwriting services, and the whole 9 yards, helping entrepreneurial authors get their book done and published so that their mother finally knows what they do for a living. And the podcast was his complement. That went live on July 1st, 2019, with 8 episodes. It went live immediately, and a lot of hoopla because I was one of the 8 people, and we got everybody to share, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The work we did with the Write Your Book in a Flash podcast, after we got it live, I stopped. I took a metaphorical screenshot of it, and I documented all the steps and all the learnings we did. Then I smoothed it out, and that became what's now known as Podcast Reach. That was the template that we used to create it. And we originally had a different name. It was simply called the Podcaster's Creation Course or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact name of it. I do remember having to speak with a trademark attorney to make sure I wasn't stepping on somebody else's rope. But at the beginning of 2021, we created what's known as the Podcast Reach system. That site's been live for 11 months now. We have our Everything Podcasting group, which is where you and I met originally. And we are very happy to say that we have developed a nice little cadre of VIP reachers. We have a few that have already gone live through our process. So we did our beta round. And I have right now, at last count, I believe I have 5 at various stages in the pipeline toward launch. Our process typically takes between 60 and 90 days. And the difference is depending on how fast the client wants to move. Like I have one who's super motivated. I mean, she came on just last week and she's already a step ahead of where she should be. She emailed me while we were on here today saying, hey, look what I did. Love it. And then sometimes we have those that they have life stuff they're dealing with at the same time, so we pace them accordingly. And sometimes people need to go through a journey, which is, am I worthy to be a podcaster? Could I make a good podcast host? Who would want to let me interview them? Who would want to be on my show? What do I have to say? So that's another thing that makes podcast reach unique, particularly when you participate at our connector VIP levels, is we work with you to not only develop the brand, the message, the tagline, and the foundation of your search engine marketing efforts, but we also take you through that process of finding your center, your intersection of your brilliance and your passion, and what's going to drive you for your own reasons in alignment with your truth to make a difference for your community, market, and audience, and make the world a better place with you in it.
That was a whole lot, Adam. So REACH appears to me to be an acronym. What is it an acronym for?
Okay, like a lot of things, I love acronyms because it's a great way to say things. Originally, we were going to go with REACT, and then it became REACH. I can't remember what the T stood for because we ended up not using it, but I can tell you what REACH stands for. The R is represent, reinvent, and reverberate your business and brand. So whether you are creating a new brand, whether you're becoming the spearhead of your brand, whether you want your brand to ring out, the podcast speeds it up by helping you create your own media outlet and use the power of what we call organic content multi-purposing to multiply your current efforts and take charge of that conversation in your marketplace. The E stands for engage. Engage your ideal prospects, clients, customers, and business allies. We covered that earlier. Usually, I mean, I've seen statistics that show that for people who run campaigns to get people to sign up for free strategy sessions as their prospecting strategy, they can have as low as 5% response on whatever campaign to even get people to sign up for the sessions. Then they can have a no-show rate up to 50%. Mm-hmm. With some of the experiments we've done, replacing let's do a free strategy session with I'd like to have you on my podcast, we have realized yes response rates as high as 84% to yes, I'll be on your podcast. And our rate of actually showing up to do the interview is typically never lower than 96%. So engage. A, achieve greater presence and make a difference. Here's the thing. We hear so much about networking with influencers and become an influencer. Oh, goodness. All right. Want to be an influencer fast? Launch a podcast, because here's the power you have. When you interview somebody on, in fact, let me just flip this around. I'll explain to you what you're doing, because you're doing this right now. You are credentializing me by featuring me on your show, on your live stream, on whatever you're going to do with this. You are saying, Adam is worthy to be on my show because he has a message that is compelling and may be helpful to my audience for reasons they have told me they will gain value from their experiences with me. In turn, and you've already seen me do this, I celebrate the fact that I'm here. So you credentialize me, and that's the main thing. You credentialize me by deeming me worthy, even if I'm the very first person. I don't know if I am or not. I credentialize you by saying, this is a place where I'm honored to share my brilliance and my passion, and I believe that I can make the biggest difference here. So what ultimately happens, because we credentialize each other, we become unpaid evangelists for each other. You've already seen me share your group. You've already seen me share the fact we're going to be here. I'm going to share it again. So now let's get to the C in REACH. So we've covered REA. C, close more deals and create the business and lifestyle you deserve. So what happens when you make a new friend on Facebook or LinkedIn? All too often, you get one of a few things. You get somebody who says, hey there, how's it going? Or my least favorite question of all time is, hey, nice to connect. So what's keeping you busy these days? Like, read my freaking about statements. Or they'll find one of my taglines, they'll say, oh, so I noticed that you help people exponentially reach new customers. What do you like about that? I like the fact that I'm not going to answer you. Then you get the ones where you get a pitch, it's like this long, and they're singing the me song. Oh, and would you like to see a demo? And there's my other favorite. I'd like to get my, Joyce, it's nice to meet you. I'd like to get to know my connections in depth. Let's hop on a Zoom real quick and compare notes. Okay, that is code for, I want you to come into my Zoom room so I can tell you about my business and hope you volunteer yourself as a client. Take all that, throw it away, and instead replace it with, hey, Joyce, nice to meet you. I have a podcast. Would you like to be on? That's the whole message. Or if I'm trying to appeal to you for a certain reason, instead of spending weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks liking and commenting on your stuff, hoping you notice me among the other hordes of your fans until it's finally appropriately for me to find some excuse to slide into your DMs and try not to seem like a guy who's trying to pick you up. Because that is an issue that is in the industry. Not by me, because I'm respectful, but I do hear a lot of complaints about that. Instead, the approach is, Joyce, I love that post you made the other day. On my podcast, our listeners love this stuff. Would you like to come on and talk more about it? So I have just shortcutted the whole graze, click, like, comment, slide into DMs, and they got it to, oh, this is cool. Post, write a sentence about why I like it, into the DMs. Hey, I love that. My listeners would love it too. Want to come on and talk some more about it? That's it. So that's the C. And that's in closing more deals. So the podcast opens the conversation. And the conversation is what you have when you do the recording or you do the live stream. What happens afterward in what's known as the green room, that place where you continue the conversation after you finish the interview, that's where the magic happens. The green room is where the green grows, as I like to say. Now, finally, the H. And the H stands for two things: harmonize with your market and become the hunted, not the hunter. I had a real funny thing happen. This is actually one of my clients. One of my clients a couple years ago tried to get on somebody's podcast, and the host of the podcast not only declined them, but made a point of being an asshole about how they were declining besides. They're saying, and by the way, don't ever contact us again or there'll be consequence. Like, what the hell? So my client launches their podcast, and that same person shows up on their radar screen saying, hey man, how you doing? I love your podcast, and I saw this episode and I listened to it and I thought it was great. Hey, is there any room for me on that podcast? Become the hunted, not the hunter. And harmonize simply means by having these conversations, you get the best possible market research available, which is to speak with actual people who are doing things in your industry, people who are prospects to receive what your industry has to offer, and people who have contributions to make to your industry. So if you want to get to know a market, interview people in that market. That's so harmonize and become the hunted, not the hunter.
What would you tell somebody who wants to start a podcast? But well, first let me back up a bit. How to be productive in achieving your goal, which is to get more clients, sell a product or whatnot.
Yeah.
How often would you say a person needs to do a podcast?
We cover this in Podcast Reach, and we actually have a formula that helps you decide, but I'll cut to the chase, and this is where it tends to end up with all of our clients. We recommend you do at least one episode every week. If you do it, you can do it daily. However, you may eventually tire yourself out or run out of guests. And then you also put yourself under a huge crunch where you're going to have to pay people to be able to spin that around in time. And if you create a daily expectation, if you miss a day, it's like a lightning bolt coming from the sky. Believe me, I've seen it happen. Weekly, you have plenty of time. If your calendar of upcoming episode recordings runs a little short, you can pull a little energy into reaching out to a few people saying, hey, I have a few extra openings. Let's get you in, get that all set. In the meantime, you have the time to do a comfortable interview. I know you and I are going to be together for about an hour. One of my podcasts lasts for an hour because it's kind of a mastermind type podcast. And Then you have time to properly, you can pre-promote it, you can promote it more than once, you can get your guests involved and sharing it with their audience, give them swipe files and tools to encourage them to do it, which then increases your reach. And you can really do a nice job with one of these episodes. Now, if you want to do an episode like monthly or anything more than weekly, I call that a whenever podcast. And basically it indicates a lot of what your business is about. So if you're doing an episode whenever you get around to it, well, that's probably how you treat your clients. It's how you do anything, is how you do everything. So you show the world that you're persistently consistent. Now, with our Brilliance Plus Passion project, I'm going to make an acknowledgement. And this is, and depending on when somebody is listening to this, it may be different at another time. We have released 2 batches of episodes on the Brilliance Plus Passion project so far. The first one was 70 episodes and the second one was 13. And yes, I said 70. We launched a podcast with 70 episodes. Whew. We are in the process of transitioning Brilliance Plus Passion so that it will release 5 episodes per week and they'll all happen on the same day.
Wow.
Yeah. The purpose of Brilliance Plus Passion, which you've been on, is, and you know the experience, we speak with you for about 15 minutes. And we're mostly shining the spotlight on you, and we have those fun questions where people get to discover what a really fun, cool person Joyce Wheeler is. Those are my conversation openers. My other podcast, the Business Creators Radio Show, it's an audio podcast, so I do it sitting out on my balcony in my wicker chair with a cigar. And this and the experience the listener has is they're sitting at a table where there's 3 people, themselves, me, and my guest, and they're just sort of sitting in while me and my guest mastermind together and get inspired by each other's aha moments and have their pad of paper and 2 pens to capture the discoveries that will naturally arise as they lean in and immerse themselves in what's in front of them right now.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. Consistency really is key, and weekly is what Earth, Body, and Ecosystems podcast, what we do. So say, for instance, because one thing that held me back from podcasting for so long was, what am I going to talk about? How am I going to get people to interact with me and go to my website and look at my products? How am I going to do that? That's what held me back. You
Right.
have any suggestions about that?
Okay, let me back up a step because I think I know where you're going with this. And if I don't answer this exactly one-to-one, I think the insight I give you will still be helpful. With our podcast reach system, we hear various iterations of how you can start a podcast. Just yesterday, I was at the cigar shop and I had somebody try and tell me about the benefits and joys of Anchor.fm. And I said, Anchor.fm is cool, but if you want to have a podcast, your key networking, client attraction, celebrity expert branding tool that can be a powerful weapon in your search engine marketing toolbox, no. Also, I recommend that if you have a business website already, that you don't just simply add a category to its blog function that's category podcast and add a link to your menu that says podcast. We, as a role, build our reachers a separate dedicated website for the podcast. Few reasons why, and I have a report that lists, I think, dozens of reasons why, but I'll hit 3 of them. One is you can run a separate search engine marketing strategy from that podcast website that enables you to capture a separate keyword, key phrase, or combination or list of those that you may not be able to achieve with a website that's entirely focused on you selling your stuff. Second item is that when you're running it through your own new media portal, that shows the world that you take your investment seriously, and it implies that you are a seasoned media professional. That will get you more bookings on other people's podcasts and even bookings on other people's stages for their seminars and events. And then here's the third one, and this happened to a friend of mine. He's not actually a client, but he's a really good friend of mine. Well, actually, he is a client, but not for reach. He's on my business consulting side. He did that thing where he started a podcast and he added it to his existing website and added the little tab to his menu that said podcast. And he showed me and I said, you know what, more power to you. Because I don't know, maybe it was going to work out for him. I don't judge. Well, what happened is he had he's in a very narrow but deep niche. And there's riches and niches, or niches, or whatever. He had somebody come to him offering him a gob of money, I won't say how much, for the opportunity to sponsor his entire podcast. In other words, be listed as a sponsor on every episode, have stuff on his podcast that says sponsored by, which is a dream that many podcasters have. They have some really big player give you big money just to have their name on every single one of your episodes. And he couldn't do it because it would have interfered. It would have interfered with the website where he sells his books, his coaching, his recorded courses, etc. And when the sponsor saw that, they said, oh, we probably wouldn't really stand out here. However, if you have a separate website and you get that type of sponsor that wants to sponsor just your entire podcast, the dream that people have, that unicorn that they chase, because it's a separate portal, you can put banners on every single page for your sponsor. You can even edit your logo to say sponsored by. So you can find more ways to celebrate your sponsor that will encourage them to give you even more money and even promote your podcast for you. And if you take that into micro, you may have a setup where you allow people to sponsor individual episodes. So they'll pay for their name and their logo and their commercial on just one episode, maybe pay $500 for that. But still, you miss out on that opportunity unless you have your own dedicated media portal. And if you're looking to get your podcast syndicated into an actual traditional radio station, or you're looking to get booked as a featured guest expert on your local news station or even one of the national or global news stations, when they can introduce you as the host of the X podcast located at Y, and when somebody goes to Y, all they're going to see is that podcast. Now, to quote that line from one of my favorite movies, Training Day, it becomes player to player, pimp to pimp.
That's something, because what you just said not to do is what I have done. I've got my podcast on, but now tell me if this is wrong, because it's my speaking website.
Okay. I mean, it depends. I did say I didn't judge the guy. In fact, I said more power to him, and I want him to show me that method would actually work effectively. And what's really great about it is he has gotten clients from doing that podcast who have invested in his services. So it is achieving a monetization goal for him. I'm just saying, if he had taken that one extra step and moved it over just to the side of his business branding website, he could have taken that sponsor deal and gotten a nice little cash infusion. Plus, somebody else out there is, if you get a sponsor like that, they may begin treating your podcast as a de facto extension of their brand, which means you get mentioned in their stuff all the time. That means visitors. That means downloads.
That means exposure.
Yes. And,
so
what you do next, you go on another sponsor, you start another podcast, get somebody else to sponsor the other one. There's no law that says you only have to have one. I have two, and I'm planning a third.
How do you find time to do that?
Okay.
Plus have two businesses.
All right. One of the misconceptions is that podcasting is hard and time consuming. This is because of some of the information that you see out there. I go into some other podcasting groups other than my own, which is called Everything Podcasting. And I see post after post after post about people fussing about what microphone to use, what soundboard to use. Should I buy a computer? I remember last year, because you know how we've gotten various stimuluses from our government here in the United States. We got the Trump checks, the Mnuchin Mullah, and the Biden bucks. So rewind to last year when the Trump checks came out, and I believe I think that was $1,200. I can't remember. Yeah, it was $1,200.
You're correct.
So yeah, so this person took his $1,200 and he bought the Rodecaster Pro kit, which is $1,000, and it's actually a really good all-in-one system. If you want to get some nice gadgets for your podcast, it's called the Rodecaster. It's an all-in-one. It's $1,000. If you like that stuff, go for it. In fact, I recommend that one. And then he also went and bought, I think he said $200 in sound insulation or something. I don't know. But he listed all this stuff and he said, the possibilities. So somebody in that group, I'm not going to mention any names, said, man, I love to geek out on technology. dude, show me how it works when you got it hooked up. By the way, what's your podcast about? He hadn't even thought about that. That's where time gets wasted. Because they get so obsessed with the technology, the gadgetry, the perfection, the, oh my goodness, there's a little bit of glare in my glasses coming from my screen. I'm using a Logitech headset instead of a Yeti mic. Ooh, my cat's up here knocking my webcam around. Oh, it's terrible. Get all that. Get a good internet connection. I went and plugged a wire into my router so I could have wired internet to increase my stream and make it more clear. I got a Logitech 4K Brio webcam. It was 179 bucks. I have this Logitech headset. It's like 40 bucks. I also have a Shure SHURE microphone, and I also have an Audio Technica, but I don't use them very often. This works. This works. At some point, I'm going to work on my background. I might do a virtual green screen, or I might do a setup in one of the other rooms here in my apartment. So I have like branding stuff on the back. I just haven't gotten to it yet, whatever. I just zoom the camera to minimize the fact you see my messy couch back there. I don't care. What matters is that I entertain you. So that's one thing to consider, is simplify getting it started in the first place. And here's a little tip. When you're designing your podcast technology, even if you plan to do all of it from a studio, assume that you'll be doing it mobile. And that will force you to be minimalist and essentialist and optimize, because your entire podcast needs to fit in a laptop bag. You can do that, you're on your way. Because my entire podcast fits in a laptop bag. Second thing, when you are creating your raw content, and this is a big piece of the podcast reach system, follow what we call the pre-editing process. The idea is you optimize everything as much as possible ahead of time. You plan your episodes. If there are certain things you say every time, you have that written down word for word so your branding is there. You know what questions you're going to ask your guests. You have your guest information right in front of you. You do a quick sound and or video check when you first log in. You explain to your guests that, hey, if we lose connection, just hang tight, I'll be back. Or if you get kicked out, just log back in. Mitigate it all. And have tools at your disposal that enable you to talk about your own business, even as you're featuring your guests. That enable you to, if you have a guest that for some reason is tongue-tied, or they're having a bad day, or they just turn out not to have much to say, you can still make that an amazing, engaging interview and make them look like a freaking superstar, which they'll love you for. And there's more to it. We also cover things like how to eliminate your verbal pauses if you choose to, breathing techniques. We get into whether or not you should use profanity on your show. I do, because it has to do with the avatars I create when I put myself through my own process earlier this year when I reevaluated everything and made sure I was in alignment. Some audiences go for it and some don't, and you also need to potentially have a case-by-case calibration, which comes to understanding who your guests are. So if you're doing just that little bit of due diligence, if you have a process where your guest effectively tells you about themselves before they even come on your show, and you can just read it and understand where they're coming from, you know whether or not that's the episode you should drop an F-bomb. So you don't even have to think about it. You just, if it has to be PG-13, keep it that way for that episode, so you don't have to go back and edit your rant later. I'm just using some outlier examples and some things I've seen people obsess about in groups. The point is, you get an initial raw recording that requires, in most cases, absolutely no editing at all. You use a meta style for your podcast where it's natural, it's human, it's not scripted, it's just raw. It's just two people hanging out having a conversation, which people love, by the way. They love to tune into this stuff while they're driving and jogging and play in the background while they're doing other things. They love that. And so once you get that raw piece done, all you do is either you or your assistant splices on your intro and your outro bumpers. And if you have pre-recorded commercials, just plugs them in where they're supposed to. Splice, render, post. Done. So now let me add one other element. It's the Clint Eastwood director style. Clint Eastwood is as much a successful director as he is an actor. He's been directing a lot longer than people realize. Even at the height of his acting career, he was 50% a director. So he's very good when it comes to the directing. He's gotten some criticism for his style of directing, which basically comes down to most of the scenes in his movies are done in one take. They do a take, as long as he's satisfied, it goes in the can and move on to the next one and the next one and so on. He's not going to do 50 takes to try and get the actress to say, oh, just a certain way. And he's not going to deal with minor imperfections. And if the person ad-libs just slightly, as long as what they said makes sense with the storyline, he's not going to make him recite it again to get every single word right. That sort of stuff. But here's the other piece of the Clint Eastwood style. They focus on rehearsal. They focus on optimizing the soundstage before any camera gets turned on. The soundstage, the visual stage, everything. They work with the actors to make sure that they are emotionally in the story so that they'll be able to respond to it accordingly. They make sure they have the context of what the characters are supposed to be feeling. They set up everything they can so that one take can be the take they take. And I said take 3 times. Maybe he has to do 2 takes. He does this for a couple reasons. He's actually listed several through various interviews, but I'll give you a couple of them. The big one is he wants the people involved in his productions to feel like there's constant forward motion. Think about when, Joyce, when you were in school and there was a school play and you were rehearsing for it. Was there ever a case where the teacher, the instructor, just felt like you guys weren't getting it and they made you rehearse the same song or the same scene from the Christmas play the entire day? Did that ever happen?
No.
Okay, well, that's happened to a lot of people. And how do you think they felt? They felt debilitated. They felt like there was no forward motion. It became a chore. It became a pain. However, if everybody on the movie goes to work and you got 14 scenes done that day, well, heck, we got 14 scenes done that day. Tomorrow we'll do 14 more. Forward motion, the power of inertia. Another piece of it is Clint Eastwood tends to have multiple projects going on simultaneously, or he's booked in such a way that he'll be barely out of one before he has to go all in on the next one because he just lines them up. So he doesn't have the time to deal with obsessive retaking. Got to get it right. So you combine the pre-editing process with the Clint Eastwood director style, and you're going to open up all sorts of time that's going to be you spending more time promoting your podcast and less time editing it. So you'll have more connections, more reach, and more fun.
On Adam's Facebook group, Everything Podcast, he does Facebook Live. What is it, once a week?
Yeah, they're usually on Wednesdays. Sometimes we move them if I'm ever testing, if I'm ever like just doing a test, because sometimes I just move it to a different day and time just to test engagement. And some cases, like if I have to go meet with my photographer or something and I just can't physically be there, we'll move it. We set the expectation typically on Wednesdays. And then one other thing we do in the group is, and if I can share this real quickly, a lot of podcasters will, as part of their marketing strategy, just join like 1 million Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups and whatever they do on Instagram or TikTok or what have you. And as soon as an episode comes out, they just carpet bomb the living heck out of all of it. We don't allow that in our group. What we do is every Thursday, whenever I get online, is I make a post that says, share your latest and greatest episode as a host or a guest. And I have everybody share their episodes in the contents, in the comments. I have people who have it on their calendar every Thursday to stop by Everything Podcasting to share their stuff. In fact, sometimes if I don't get to the post until a little bit later in the day, I've actually gotten phone calls saying, hey, where's the post? I'm ready to share. And this is a real quick tactic for you because our listeners, you may end up using your own Facebook group to promote your own podcast. Consistency and algorithms. The reason you want to concentrate and have a few posts in your group on a regular basis, they get lots of comments and get lots of engagement all at the same time. So this is why you do live streams and encourage people to type in the comments. This is why you'll have a post like your weekly roundup and encourage people or tell them, hey, you want to share your episode? You're doing it as a comment on this post on Thursday. But be here because we want everybody here. We want to have a party. It creates algorithm spikes that whatever social network you're on will perceive, and they will rate your group as being of higher value, and therefore more of your group members, even inactive group members, will see posts in your group prioritizing their newsfeed.
Interesting. One of the reasons I brought it up is because, unfortunately, I'm real busy these days and I don't have a whole lot of time to be there. But the one time that I was able to be there, well, I watched you live a couple times. But what really stuck in my head was what you were talking about earlier with the editing. And I remember you saying that if it's so bad, just don't even put it up. Just forget it.
Well, yeah, there's a couple ways. First of all, let go of your perfection. Focus on optimizing before you hit record, and you'll just get a better product to begin with. You probably won't need to edit at all. That's item number one. Item number two is, and this happens every once in a while. Maybe technology is just not in your favor. Maybe your guest is just really having a bad day. Maybe you're having a bad day and just can't even pull yourself together enough to mail it in. It happens to all of us. Just reschedule and do it again. No big deal. And I also had something happen to me once. Last count, I think there's over 500 episodes of the Business Creators Radio Show. We've been every week, sometimes twice a week, depending on our load, since September 2013. In all that time, I have had exactly one guest ask that we not air their episode. The reason being, and this goes back to something I said earlier, she got all upset because I said the F word, and she just can't risk having it's like, and her agent contacted me with this and was like all apologetic. It's like, dude, she doesn't want to be on. She doesn't want to be on. And by the way, she's not all that good of a guest, so whatever. So if once in a while you have those types of things, you say, cool, you know what? If they have that much problem with being on my show, okay, so I wasted a few minutes on a conversation, delete, move on.
Right.
I mean, take a minute to learn from it. I mean, the moment of introspection I spent on that told me just to continue to be aware that if I want to go into shock jock mode, to make sure that the guests and the potential recipients they'll introduce me to have a tolerance for that. She, on the other hand, basically was carrying unchecked baggage, if you know what that means.
Yeah.
So I couldn't help it. You're going to have that happen once in a while. You're going to have somebody that comes back to you. We've had this happen a couple times. We've interviewed financial advisors and people in financial regulated industries who will come back a year later and say, oh, our compliance department has now changed their mind and we're not allowed to have podcast episodes up. And then they'll send me all this legalese that they copy pasted from their compliance department. It says, you're responsible for making sure that my episode and anything you've done to promote on social media is deleted. And we also need you to go out to other networks where it may be syndicated to ensure that the content has been removed, per FINRA or what have you. And my response to that is, I deleted it from my blog. The rest of it's your problem. Next time, get in line with your compliance department or don't come at all. Because again, I can't solve their issues. And I'm saying this in this blunt way because I want your listeners to understand that these things that people worry about don't need to be worried about. Just have the mindset of, I am here. At my intersection of my brilliance and my passion, I make a difference for my community, market, and audience. I serve first. I am somebody who makes the world a better place by being part of it. I'm a connector. I'm an influencer. I make things happen. A couple pebbles on the road are not going to throw me out of alignment. I'm going to keep driving.
And I think too, like if you do have issues with that, any kind of compliance thing should be presented before the podcast is even done.
Well, yeah, and as soon as I hear, anything about those types of licenses and certifications, I assume that that might be in the background. But I also know that depending on which organization it is, they have different interpretations of how to enforce this stuff. So here's another point, and I'm going to share this because it comes up. I take people at their word. So if they're applying to be on my show, I just assume they got that worked out. If they don't have it worked out, that's on them, not me. I assume
Right.
you show up at my doorstep and ask to be on my podcast, you got your ducks in a row. Similarly, I don't go through massive vetting for my guests. For the Brilliance Plus Passion podcast, which is my networking tool, you can go up and book yourself to be on that show without even speaking with me. As long as you have something valuable to offer about how you make the world a better place by being part of it, I'll spend 15 minutes with you and give you some profile. As long as you have something valuable for our guests, as long as you're doing something either entrepreneurial or creative, and you're not just there to talk about your latest breakup or something, unless you're a dating coach. Yeah. And for my Business Creators Radio show, which is the more mastermind type format, I only go as far as to look at their application and see, okay, does their title and their suggested interview questions they submit, does this show me that they have something interesting? If the answer is yes, I'll interview them. I'm not going to go and listen to 10 of their episodes where they said substantially the same thing that they're going to say on my show, just so I can get a sense of what kind of guest they're going to be. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do a background check on them. I'm not going to read over their promotional materials above and beyond what I had them put in my form. If you're on my doorstep saying you want to be on my show, I'm going to assume you got your ducks in a row. And that's it.
Right.
It's yours to lose. And very few people fail in any way to come through on that. Almost all of them turn out to be amazing guests. And the ones that need a little help, I'm a seasoned, experienced interviewer, and I have all these tactics we share through the pre-editing process that I can use to turn any interview amazing. And just through sheer practice, I've gotten to the point where it's second nature to me. So that's the other thing, is this whole thing about vetting guests. And, a good friend of mine, Denise Griffiths, host of Your Partner in Success Radio. I've been on her show. She's been on mine. She's a great friend of mine. We've collaborated in business. And this is just one of the very few areas where she and I have different views. For her podcast, Your Partner in Success Radio, if this is your first time being on her show, she will do a 15-minute pre-interview with her because she needs to see the goods for herself. And also the same thing, she's not going to research you. She's not going to listen to your 5 of your episodes. She's not going to read your promotional materials. It's like, get on my Zoom. Let me hear it for myself. And the main reason she does is because her show is actually live and she needs that extra level of insurance. Okay. But in my case, I don't, because it's not live. I mean, my absolute worst case scenario is the episode doesn't run. But as I've told you, I had that one person who complained about my using the F word, and then there were a couple others in regulated industries where the compliance changed their mind. I mean, out of 500 plus, that's not even a drop in a bucket.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you don't even think about that. I can't even remember that woman's name. If somebody said the name right now, it probably wouldn't even register. She was such a non-entity to me, because the moment I heard that she just couldn't handle being on my show, it's like, cool, you're off. Yeah, big deal. After I got done explaining to her agents, like, dude, stop apologizing. You have nothing to be sorry for, Dan. Man, we're friends. Right. I get it. She doesn't want to be on it. I actually don't even care why. Just, we won't run it. It's cool. Who else you got? That was the conversation.
I want to go back to what you were talking about, that everything for your podcast can fit in your laptop bag. Yep. Actually, when I first started, when I started doing just strictly audio, have you heard of that, the Zoom box?
No, I haven't.
It's a box. It's called Zoom, which is like really,
now I know that thing. It's sort of like an off-board thing that records audio.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's gadgetry. If you want to do it, do it. I don't have an opinion on that. It's just your decision how elaborate you want to get with that. If you feel that you want to have an offline recording of your audio, then do it. It's whatever. And if it gives you that extra stream that when you do your post-production editing, you drop it on the timeline, align it with the other recording, and then just pick whichever audio sounds best. You do that, whatever.
Well, the thing that I was going to bring up is that my husband was in the music industry, and and he was the one editing the podcast.
Yeah.
He was so picky. We had one guest, and I talked to my guests before I had them on too, just to see how talkative they are, to have a conversation, just kind of have a get to know you conversation.
Well, let me stop you right there. Music is different because with music, you have a different type of audience objective. You have a different kind of financial objective. And recording music is, in this day and age, it's designed primarily to get you other types of work, because you're not going to make a lot of money selling albums, just like you're probably not going to make a lot of money selling your book. The music is designed to get you notoriety so that you will rank on streaming services like Spotify, for example, or iTunes, which, your ratings on Spotify or iTunes mean almost as much as the Billboard Top 40 anymore. And they also go back to a certain style. My late friend Benny Mardones, who sang that song "Into the Night," he had a quirk in how he sang, and he was aware of this. In fact, he said it made him $1 million. Where at some point while he was singing, he would make a noise like, "Oh!" And a couple times he would go back to the studio to have put in. So he would go up to the microphone, make the sound so they could splice it in, because when he listened to the draft recording, he felt it should be there. Paul Anka, who is notoriously perfectionist, there's that infamous tape of him ranting about the shirts and how he's going to slice like a hammer and everything. The story about him is he once canceled a flight and made an emergency booking at his studio because he listened to a draft of one of his songs and he felt that he should have sang one word with a slightly different cadence. So he went through all that so that he could go to the microphone and sing that word with a different cadence and have it spliced in. So yeah, from your husband's perspective in the music industry, there's a different standard. It's not meta. It's rehearsed, it's planned, it's scientific. They even may involve neurolinguistic programming to put listeners into trance. Your podcast doesn't need to do that.
No, he was on the sound end of it.
Yeah.
He did sound, so he's very meticulous. But he was editing the podcasts. I had spoken to one of my guests, and he said he had a radio show, and I was like, cool, the conversation went really well. And then he gets on the podcast and I was like, oh no.
Within our pre-editing process videos, we actually have scripts you can use, you can memorize to deal with when the guest does that. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Is you essentially take over the conversation and just get them to tell stories, because if they're umming and ahhing to that degree, it means that they are not yet comfortable enough with their brand and don't have their brand internalized enough that they can speak of it. Like the way I can say that launching and hosting your podcast helps you serve your community, market, and audience from your intersection of your brilliance and your passion, so that you make the world a better place by being part of it. See, that's me actually mixing and matching my taglines, because I've said them so many times, so many different contexts. I can do that on the fly. That guest just couldn't. The shortcut is to do two things. A, ask questions where you talk about yourself and get them to give you feedback on what you just said. So if I had somebody in our topic was, say, organizational effectiveness, because we do episodes like that on Business Creators Radio Show, I might, if I caught somebody like that, I might say, I've been doing a lot of work with virtual teams, and one thing I noticed is they have too many meetings, and the meetings drag on because people feel compelled to ask questions which everybody already knows the answers to, just so they don't get called out later for not participating. And then they go around, they want to ask everybody their thoughts so everybody feels included. And then you get cases, and I timed this once, where somebody actually spent 13 minutes explaining that they had nothing else to add. So here's what you do. You organize your meeting in such a way where you have your people who are coming to the meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, in 4 categories. Category 1 is the facilitator or the leader. That's probably you. Category 2 are the contributors. These are the people who are leading various projects. They're the ones who have reports, and they're the ones you go around to and they speak. Each of these contributors will have with them a second The second may be their colleague from their department or what have you. The second's job is simply to sit there quietly and observe and catch anything that their paired contributor might miss, to be their contributor's eyes and ears, and to be a debriefing partner afterwards. And also, if the contributor can't make it to a particular meeting, the second can step in as the acting contributor because they're recognized as being that person's number two. So you have those three right there. And then you have the fourth group. They're the observers. They're there to observe. They don't need to speak. They may not want to speak. They may simply be there because they want to be in the loop and they want to hear it from the horse's mouth. Or they want to be visible. And the best way to be visible is to be seen sitting in that meeting. Hey, they saw you there. You were in the meeting. So you stop wasting time on people who don't need to talk. And you might get out of your meeting early, and it might be a fun experience for y'all. So you see what I just did there? I mean, that's totally not about podcasting at all, but I just right out of ether pulled a story. So have at your disposal 10 to 15 good stories you can tell in a minute or two that you can pull out at will and you can use to engage the person. Because after I say that to them, if it's one about organizational effectiveness, I could then ask a question like, so what issues have you seen when it comes to making meetings suck less? And what do you think about what I just shared? Well, now you've given them something direct to respond to that they don't have to reach into their own pocket for. So now you get them talking.
Well, see, that was a thing, is that he was telling his own story.
Yeah.
Of how he was dealing with a health issue and how he overcame it. So he lived it. He should have known it. I really didn't see any reason for him to be mean.
I don't want to cast aspersions because I'm sure the guest was a wonderful person. A couple things. They may have just been way off their game that day, or maybe they took too many pills. I mean, it happens to all of us. You forgot you take your prescription, you take one an hour later, and it messes your mind for a few hours. All these things can happen. And as a host, I've had a couple cases where I just wasn't up to doing the interview that day. So if I have to, I'll reschedule it and I'll just cite family emergency or something. But otherwise, what I'll do is I'll just get my guest to talk. I'll say something to fire them up and I'll just sit back and let them go. That way I don't have to say much. I'll just let them shine the light on themselves.
Right.
So either way, you get a great product that you and your guest will love, be honored to share with your respective audiences as you credentialize each other. So for that person, the only thing I can say is they were probably just off their game that day. And in that situation, if I noticed it was that bad, I might have paused and asked them if they were okay.
I don't think I really noticed it, but we are at the top of the hour. Adam,
Yes, we are.
It's been great. It's been great having you here. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with the group Entrepreneurs Are Us, the knowledge that you have. And if they want to come and work with you, where can they find you?
Okay. I encourage people to go. I'm going to give you the business option and then the social option, if that's okay. And I'll keep this quick. www.thereachsystem.com will explain how podcast reach works, and it'll also give you a sense of the different ways we can serve you. On that website, you can schedule a 20-minute reach out call with me. The call is free. The possibilities are endless. You don't have to ask my permission. Just say that you heard my interview on Entrepreneurs Are Us with Joyce Wheeler, and I'll know where it came from. And I'll be ready to say hello when we meet at our mutually scheduled date and time that you'll book. Option number two, you just want to join the conversation, come to my group, Everything Podcasting. Now, if you're listening to this a year from now and I've decided to change the name of the group or whatever, I will give you a URL that'll still work because I won't let it expire. It's www.everythingpodcasting.group, not .com, .group. So everythingpodcasting.group, and that will have a link that enables you to immediately jump into the Facebook group and we'll have some fun.
Do you have any last words to share with our listening audience?
Okay, my last words are, one of the things that people get really obsessed with when it comes to would I be an effective podcast host, should I do this, is who's going to tune into this, where am I going to get listeners, and where am I going to get downloads? Listeners and downloads should not be your goal. Forget about it. Just forget about listeners and downloads for a minute. I mean, they're important. I'm not downgrading it. But you want something sustainable? Focus on how your podcast is your key networking, client attraction, celebrity expert branding tool with great guests, exciting, engaging content. Word gets around. People love being on your show so much they share it far and wide to credentialize themselves, and your community gets a buzzing. You, as an influencer, because you host your show, get on other people's shows as a result of interviewing them first. And now you start to show up all over the place. Word keeps getting out. Your search engine marketing efforts, because you're writing this to your own dedicated website, you can optimize those. You're coming up more and more on searches for places you want to be found. Word's getting out. Listeners and downloads will be a consequence or a result of all these things. So you take your listeners and downloads and you say, yes, I want lots of that. We all do. And you treat it as a result, not as a goal. And you optimize your goals so that will be one of the results. And if you do that, you're going to have more sustainability. And because you're getting more connections and opening more conversations, you will monetize faster.
Thank you, Adam, so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. And to our audience, thank you for being here and listening, or to whatever you're doing. Anyway, thank you.